those that couldn't hear the question online, the question is addressing the departure of Olivier and the mutual agreement to do so. It's not been a quick knee-jerk reaction. I think conversations have been ongoing with Olivier and his representatives about what makes most sense going forward for him and for LAFC, and we were open to what options may surface. And as of a couple of weeks ago, they saw that there was this opportunity, and we discussed things back and forth and felt like the time was right and to support him in his move. And where that leaves LAFC is now, it opens a designated player spot, and obviously I don't need to explain what that means in terms of our roster, but we obviously have some work to do to fill the shoes, and there are ongoing plans to do so.
So conceivably 2 DP open slots for this summer window. Is that right?
I would say we have optionality with Dilrosun's loan, and we have Denis as the senior DP. We have optionality on Dilrosun's loan, who currently occupies a DP spot, and then Olivier's would open the third spot.
Yeah. You've addressed it, but I didn't ask you the question. The money that you got from the Club World Cup, how do you see that factoring into the decisions you're making in terms of roster this season and sort of the recent decisions that are coming for you? Yeah.
Every decision we make when it comes to discretionary spend, so on players, on infrastructure, whatever it is always done with our business in mind. And so obviously this money from qualifying for the Club World Cup, and then the little bit that we got in addition, I shouldn't call it a little bit, and the additional performance-related bonus we got for the draw the other day will go into it's part of running a business, and now will help the club in its operations, and we should see some of that certainly going towards improving the squad.
Yeah. On Olivier, does bringing in an older player like you did with him, and I think most people would agree it didn't go the way that everybody would have wanted it to go. Does that influence how you think about bringing in elder statesmen of the game, players who have obviously had tons of success in Europe internationally, and bringing them here in later stages of the career?
I think it's personally, I would say a better way to look at it is a case-by-case basis rather than generalizing about a category of player and the success and what have you. What I would say is we learn with every signing we make. We do a post-mortem and say, what did we know? Why did we make this decision? What was good? Which ones work? Which ones don't? And that all folds into our analysis for every future decision. And I can hear the argument as to what expectations were and what have you. And Olivier joined a club where the expectations are to win every trophy every year, and we didn't do that. So I get it, but I think I'm not here to talk about unmet expectations or anything like that. I think for me, there is a lot of influence that people don't see that these types of players with Olivier's status and experience bring in, and we've had the great fortune of having a number of them in our short history at LAFC, and we don't measure success with everything that happens on the field with an individual, but rather how the group comes together and the team's success. And while last year didn't finish exactly where we wanted it, we were in position, we won the West, we won a trophy, we qualified for the Club World Cup this year, and we're certainly excited about the rest of this season and seeing what noise we can make now that we're focused on the league with Leagues Cup as well. So for us, I would say the point of this is to thank Olivier and his family for the contribution that they made, and to wish him well. And I don't know what has been announced or what is public, but it's clear that we aren't the only people in the world that think Olivier can add to a football team.
Just lastly from me, the Club World Cup experience, what you saw from the team, from the group, the results, and everything that went along with that. What's your takeaway from being able to participate in this tournament, and how do you think the team looks coming out of it?
Fantastic experience. I would say the Club World Cup, the way I discussed it with staff both during the tournament and now as we're doing our, as I call them, post-mortem analysis, I think tournaments like that stress you in ways that, and when I say stress you, I don't mean we got stressed out, but rather they stress test your systems, your team, your process. And I think we had a lot of learning moments where I felt like we weren't quite up to the challenge of a tournament like that. And that's on the field, that's off the field. And I think what I always say after these things, all we can do now is learn from them. And I would say it's disappointing. I wouldn't say we walked in, sure that we would qualify, but I think we thought we had a chance. We were eyes wide open as to what challenge was ahead of us with one of the best teams in the world. And then what I would say, probably, in my opinion, the best team in South America. And it required us to punch above our weight. You guys know the difference in spend and all the rest of it. And I do think coming out of it, I think we can say it was respectable. Was it the best version of LAFC? No. I think one thing we learned is that I would say, and I think Steve made comments to this after the Flamengo game, where it was like 5 good halves and 1 that cost us. I would say there were 5 decent halves. I think there were some better than others. I don't think it was as though we played 5 amazing halves. But, coming out of the Chelsea game, we felt pretty good and confident. I thought first half against Esperance was good in control despite not scoring, aside from the 2 offside goals. And then, the lesson there is in these tournaments, when the margins are so thin and you're having to punch above your weight, a second half like that's just not acceptable. And all of a sudden, within 45 minutes, you're out of the tournament. And then going from there, knowing you're playing against such a good team, I would say we're proud of the response. And frankly, given the fatigue, the roster, the injuries to Ordaz and some others, I think we played how we had to play. So I would say I was proud of that in the last game. And then certainly there are a lot of damn good teams that don't tie Flamengo. And that was like an away game. The other thing that I think is not necessarily lost, but wasn't spoken about, is and there was reason for it, but I just wish, for our sake, those games were in LA. That was a huge difference for us and for the guys to be on the road, and as taxed they were to put in that last effort against Flamengo, I think is admirable. And now I think switching gears very quickly, I could see today the guys are really excited to be home, as am I, as are the guys. And it almost feels like the first day of preseason. I'm sure guys' bodies don't necessarily feel that way, but I think we're excited now with another big challenge coming on Sunday against a top team in Vancouver, and we're focused now on making sure we make up some ground in the league.
Just a quick one, and you talk about on the field, but just off the field, I mean, the perception of being on the field in the spotlight for this audience in Brazil, North Africa, and England, chance to shake hands with some people there. How has that advanced what you get to do? Do you think there'll be a tangible difference in how LAFC is perceived and the business that they do?
Yeah, I think, as I said, it was a really tough challenge to advance out of that group. Do I think we had what it took to get there? Had we pulled it all together and had a few bounces? Yes, I do. So on the one hand, I'm a bit disappointed sitting here not being in the tournament anymore, and I'm not saying that individually. I'm saying that the whole building here feels that way. On the other hand, what I would say is, having played in the UK and being in touch with people who know what I do here, but maybe don't take the time to wake up in the middle of the night to watch LAFC or even MLS for that matter. And I also want to mention, I think this isn't just us, but certainly Miami, but I also think Seattle, I think opened some eyes globally to new audiences with this increased level of exposure as to how competitive this league is. And as I say, after the Chelsea match, I think some eyes were open. I know their staff, even having scouted us, but still felt like we really gave them a run. And, at 1-0, a couple of the chances maybe put them on their heels a little bit. And what an amazing chance for us as a club to go toe-to-toe with a team like that, which is just an incredible opportunity. And then to face a different dynamic with Esperance, and the environment that their fans created in Nashville was incredible. And then obviously feeling like we're in Rio when we played the last match and all that. So just amazing experience that I hope we learn from, and it gives us the hunger to make sure that we're qualifying for the next tournament. But to answer your question directly, I think with that increased level of exposure, I received, this is, anecdotal and myopic in terms of just me, but I received tons of messages from from former colleagues, people in the UK that certainly took notice of what MLS means as a league in terms of its competitiveness. And I think the only thing I rue a little bit is if we could have shown more of what an environment in LA could have been like, because I think our supporters that did travel were well heard, and just amazing the level of commitment of some of our supporters and the passion that they brought. But I do think that was one thing that, if I can say, I wish we had the opportunity to do, to showcase the club, not just with what we do on the field, but would be that. But obviously that was for good reason.
All right, we'll move to take questions online. Dave Denholm, go ahead and unmute and get us started.
Hey, John. Certainly an important transfer window now coming up for LAFC in light of the news today. How does that affect your managerial search, and then vice versa? I know that's still in the future, but how does the managerial search actually affect this window potentially for the future of LAFC?
Yeah, good question, Dave. I wouldn't say it directly affects it. I mean, the way I would answer it is I would like for you to find a window for LAFC that wasn't an important one. So we're used to this, and for us, the managerial conversation and things like that, we are focused on the group here, and that's players, that's staff, that's everybody. We're focused on the task at hand, and whether we do bring in these additions, we will bring in additions to strengthen the group, but that will by no means is that an indication that we are not confident with the group that we have here, but rather the few missing pieces we think that we can add now as a replacement, but also to add to what we believe is already a really strong group.
And do you kind of approach a coaching search like, well, if the right candidate comes along, you'll adapt to what he or she would want, or is it more like you're going to find a manager that fits LAFC in a sense?
Much more the latter. So I think what we have been successful in doing, particularly when you talk about an expansion team, is talk about our non-negotiables in terms of how we want to play and entertain and the style of play. And obviously there are certain parameters within which a coach can move, because we don't, we've had two different coaches in our history, both successful in their own right, that are slightly different. But that foundation of principles will remain. And so the way this will work is we are LAFC. These are our ideals, and maybe we have some tweaks, but there is no revolution or real turnaround needed here. We will stick to those principles, and we will use those as a filter to decide everything in terms of players as well as coach.
Great, thank you.
You got it.
Celso, go ahead.
Hey, John, I would like to ask you about Marlon Santos, probably one of many decisions that you have with the players that are currently under contract or expiring. What can you say about Marlon, and is he going to be back with LAFC for the second part of the season?
Yeah, Marlon is a unique situation given his contractual status with the club in Ukraine, and I don't need to speak to what is going on there. So while some things and details remain unclear to us, our hope is that we can find a way to keep Marlon here at least through the rest of the season.
And then secondly, if you could expand a little bit with if you're going to have some flexibility coming up in this window, the antics and the peculiarities of dealing with the South American market. Again, I'm talking on behalf of the territory of the last. So obviously you had a chance to play Flamengo. So just curious, does that change at all your appetite for players from Brazil? You have a successful signed Igor. Can we expect more Brazilian players, South American players in LAFC in the future?
Yeah, I think we've never been shy about trying, and at times those targets have been unattainable. But I think if you look through our history, starting with Danilo Silva and now with the players we have in the current group, we certainly recognize what Brazilian footballers have to offer, and I would call all three of those signings certainly a success for different reasons. Obviously, Igor was the first young Brazilian we've invested in, and for me, I don't think he's getting the credit he deserves for the season he has had thus far, obviously playing against his former team the other night and holding his own against players that have played in World Cups and won World Cups and things like that. So I certainly think Igor as one example and Marlon as another, two players at different phases of their career. It's not lost on us what a Brazilian player may offer. I think the unfortunate reality for us is when you talk about some of the talent on Flamengo is I would put most of those in the category of unattainable, but certainly eye-opening when you see the level of talent and depth of those rosters when they're bringing Jorginho and these guys off the bench. They just have so much firepower, so many weapons, which I think is why we can hold our heads high that while disappointed given that we were up, we ended up drawing, but I think overall to get a draw against a team like that in a very away-like atmosphere is certainly credit to the group.
Thank you, John.
You got it.
And last question, Daniel Olea.
¿Qué tal, Joan? Muy buenas tardes, gracias por tu tiempo. Quería primero que nada preguntarte sobre tu resumen en general lo que fue la participación de LAFC en el Mundial de Clubes y segundo también preguntarte sobre el anuncio que se acaba de hacer oficial de la partida de Olivier, ¿qué fue lo que tú hablaste con él? ¿Cómo se llegó a ese mutuo acuerdo?
Bueno, sí, voy a hablar primero de nuestra experiencia en el Mundial de Clubes, que como dije en inglés, pero para los que entienden mejor en español, fue una experiencia increíble por el club para, el desafío en enfrentar clubes como Chelsea, Flamengo, también Esperance, una dinámica poco diferente, pero lo que necesitamos hacer es aprender de la experiencia y en ese nivel lo que aprendimos es que solo una mitad en 6 puede costar y nos cuesta el torneo. Y eso, por un lado, estamos frustrados porque obviamente sería un éxito muy grande si avanzamos, pero en esta mitad, es la segunda mitad contra Esperance, cuando no jugamos en nuestro nivel, como dije, nos costó el chance de avanzar. Pero la experiencia y la oportunidad para el club, para mostrar cómo podemos jugar y competir contra equipos muy, muy grandes en el nivel global, sería un honor en representar nuestro club, la ciudad y también la liga. Y pienso que obviamente con Miami, pero también con Seattle y nosotros, mostramos un poco del nivel de esta liga contra los equipos más grandes en el mundo. Entonces fue un honor representar, como dije, el club en este torneo y ya tenemos mucha hambre en repetirlo en 4 años. Segundo es el anuncio de Giroud hoy, que tenemos el acuerdo con él que él va a regresar a Europa y esta decisión pasó después de muchas conversaciones en los últimos meses y ya él tiene esa oportunidad con un club grande en Europa, que imagino que va a anunciar en los días que vienen. Pero con nosotros siempre sentamos con el jugador para discutir qué es mejor para él, por el club y lo que hace sentido por todos. Y esta decisión ya fue para apoyar la decisión de ir y ya abrimos un lugar de DP que tenemos planes de llenar y trae flexibilidad en la ventana que viene, que ya tenemos un grupo en que tenemos mucha confianza, pero con esta oportunidad vamos a mejorar para tratar de ganar más títulos, como siempre.
Thank you, John.